Hello and welcome. Welcome to Input English. Kathy did not expect the question. When Craig came into the room out of the blue, he said, it just doesn't seem fair. And Kathy, of course, being an attorney, she feels like her middle name is fairness. So she was very interested in this topic, and she asked Craig what he was talking about. Craig said, there's a boy in my class named Brandon. He sits next to me in class, and he's a nice kid, but he walks a little funny and he talks a little funny. So I asked him what was going on, why he was a little different, and he didn't mind telling me that he had cerebral palsy. Ever since then, I understood that there was an explanation for why he seemed a little different. But, in class, he knows the answers. He knows what's going on. He does the work. But the problem is the teacher never calls on him. Craig went on to explain, when the teacher asks a question, the kids put their hands up. And Brandon usually has his hand up first, and he knows the answers, but the teacher never calls on him. He always calls on somebody else. It just doesn't seem fair. What should I do? Is there anything that we can do about this? Kathy asked a few questions. Has he ever called on Brandon? And Craig couldn't remember that it had ever happened. Does Brandon act badly in class, that he might deserve being treated differently because of his behavior? Craig said, no, he's very, very well behaved. Said Kathy. It sounds like he's being discriminated against. It's possible that the teacher doesn't like him because of his physical appearance or the way he speaks. And of course, you're right. If that's the case, it would be really unfair. But what can we do about it? Asked Craig. Kathy said, I'm not sure what we can do about this. Let's think about it. Oh, let me tell you a story of something that happened to me when I was in school. Then Kathy explained that when she was in 11th grade, she had applied for computer programming as an elective in her senior year. But when that request was submitted, the guidance counselor said no. He called Kathy into the office and explained to her that computer programming was a class for the boys and that she should choose one of the electives more appropriate to a girl. Kathy went on to explain that that didn't seem fair. I'm a girl. I can't change that. I don't want to change that, but I sure don't want to be treated different because of that. Craig said, what did you do? Well, I told my parents, and they came into the school the next day, and I don't know what they said to that guidance counselor, but my class in computer programming was approved immediately. They never told me what they said to him. I suspect they pointed out that what he was doing was immoral and illegal. Craig thought for a moment. Then Brandon should go to his parents and tell them that he's being treated unfairly in school? She said maybe. That might be the right answer. His parents are responsible for his well-being, and they are there to look out for him and make sure that he has lots of opportunities as he grows up. So there would be nothing wrong with his parents speaking up for him, that's for sure. But there might be something that you could do. After all, you can't control what the teacher's doing, but you can control what you're doing. Kathy asked, what do you think would happen if when the teacher asked the question and Brandon's hand went up first, what if when the teacher calls on someone else, that person says, Mr. So-and-so, Brandon had his hand up first, so I think it's only fair that I let Brandon answer. Craig asked, could we do that? She said, sure, you could do it, but the teacher might not accept that. The teacher might object and simply say, I didn't call on Brandon, I called on you. So you might anticipate that response, and then you would have a choice. You could answer the question to avoid a big conflict. Another thing that could be done is when Brandon puts his arm up first, the other kids might not put up their hand. Do you think the other kids in your class have noticed that Brandon has been treated this way, or do you think it's only you? Craig said, no, everybody in the class knows that it's not fair. We've talked about it. We all agree it's not fair. Brandon agrees that it's not fair, but he doesn't want to make a big deal about it. He doesn't want to create a problem. He's just been putting up with this treatment. Well, those are some things you could do. I wouldn't get into a big fight with the teacher. I wouldn't disrupt the class. You have to behave yourself in class. But if the teacher calls on you and Brandon clearly had his hand up first, you could say, well, I don't feel right answering because Brandon had his hand up first, and then the ball's in his court. And then you see what he says. If he says, okay, Brandon, answer the question, then you've accomplished your goal, particularly if it breaks the cycle and Brandon starts getting called on more in the class. You might have just pointed out the unfairness and solved the problem. Maybe the teacher just needs to recognize his prejudices if that's the problem. And then if that doesn't work, you might talk to the other kids in the class, and when the teacher asks the question and everybody sees that Brandon's hand is up, maybe nobody else puts their hand up. Greg said, well, what if that doesn't work? Kathy says, well, if that doesn't work, I'm not sure there's a lot left for you to do. Certainly his parents could advocate for him, but that would mean he would need to bring it up to them. They could certainly talk to the principal and make sure that he's being treated fairly. The following afternoon, when the boys got home from school, Craig went to his mom and said, you were right. And she puzzled for a second. Okay, I'm right, but what am I right about? He said, when the teacher asked a question and Brandon's hand went up first, the teacher called on someone else. And that kid said, you know, Mr. Green, Brandon had his hand up first, and so I should let Brandon answer the question. That would be fair. And just like you said, Mr. Green told that kid that he didn't call on Brandon, he called on that kid, and he expected him to answer the question. And because of that, the next time Mr. Green asked a question and Brandon's arm went up first, nobody else raised their hand. He called on Brandon, and Brandon got the question correct. It happened a couple more times, and for the first time this year, Brandon got called on 3 times in one class. It was great. Kathy said, well, we're making progress. It's a little early to declare victory, but we can see a response. Now the question is, did Mr. Green learn enough that he can treat Brandon fairly over the long term, or was he just embarrassed on that one day and he's going to go back to his old ways? We will see. That's the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I invite comments below. Were you ever treated badly in school because of something you couldn't control? Hope you join us in future videos. See you soon.